evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis, in this series on the network of global corporate control. Today's segment is an update on the global currency reset. For new viewers, this is about cleaning up the corruption in the international financial system that is caused by paper currencies. It turns out that all the banks are really just one bank. This was reported in 2012 by three mathematicians, Vitali Glatfelder and Battiston of the Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, Switzerland, said to be the best university in Europe. I'll describe the heart of the network of global corporate control for you according to the latest information which I received in an email from France on the 10th of June, and I put this out on my social media. It was called Swiss Nazis and Pharaonic Nobility. The group that is fighting this corruption I call the Coalition for the Rule of Law. This coalition is on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. That is, 188 ministers of finance and development. The World Bank and IMF were set up by José Rizal at the end of World War II to administer the world's gold, other precious metals, gemstones, and artwork. First, these assets were put into hiding for 50 years so that there would be no claims at the end of this period because the claims would have grown stale. And this is a picture of José Rizal. That's a self-portrait. He is a giant of a man, although he was less than 5 feet tall. We learned in previous segments that he came from the Philippines and spoke 22 languages. He rose through the ranks of the Jesuits, becoming the Superior General in 1942. There was some controversy about whether he was 100% Malay, and yes, he was. There were people who were trying to steal the world's gold and other assets that we were describing, and they said, although he had siblings, many siblings, they said he had been adopted. When José Rizal went to the heart of the network of global corporate control, he, after he rose through the ranks, was in a position to deposit the assets that the network of global corporate control had stolen from humankind ever since the Ice Ages. Ferdinand Marcos was his lawyer. I am the overseer mandate trustee of the Global Debt Facility. That's one of the words for the trust that contains the world's assets. I had joined with other whistleblowers at the World Bank, and when I was fired in 2007 in retaliation for reporting the corruption at the World Bank to the United States Congress, instead of dropping the matter, I kept on uncovering the cover-up, ultimately buying a World Bank bond and suing the World Bank and the auditors, KPMG, and also there was the insurance company, which was giving out my private insurance information, and I also sued a man that was hired by the World Bank to assess whether or not I was a whistleblower. I sued in the federal courts, and when the court refused to recognize the settlement of my case by the Board of Governors, I kept on blowing the whistle, exposing the press, the legal, accounting, and corporate governance professions. The network of global corporate control's media blackout in the mainstream press is starting to break down. There had been one article in Newsweek on Espanol 2 years ago. I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I realized that this is probably important because my credibility is what is really on the line when people are deciding whether this could be true, that the world's assets, including their monetary gold reserves, are all in a trust that's administered by the Board of Governors. So let me tell you that I am remarkably consistent and remarkably persistent. You can see and anybody that knows me knows that I'm somebody who reports what's going on. I'm not able to keep a secret, and this is probably very good, because whenever anybody tries to bribe me, I immediately tell everybody that somebody was trying to bribe me. That's just the way I'm wired. Maybe I'll spend a day considering whether this is something that is something I want. And it turns out that the things that I really want, if somebody knew me, then they would know that these material things are not the way to bribe me, because I'm pretty immune to that kind of stuff. I play the cello, which means that I probably would like a Stradivarius, but not really more than my integrity, because that's just the way I'm hardwired. And that's also what you can see if you look at my history, because you can see that people didn't know anything about me, and I just kept going. I was reporting to all of the institutions that I thought were honest. What I ended up doing was being part of a barium diagnosis of where the corruption was, and I have always been working with groups of other whistleblowers. I did this deliberately because that's how I was trained at the World Bank to operate. I realized that teams are important so that the shortcomings of any particular individual can be complemented. One of the things that I did back in 1999 was I was part of a board task force to look into the human resources at the World Bank. And what I discovered was that there was no really serious effort to pay attention to the board, which was what was supposed to be running the World Bank. That was an eye-opener for me, and I became very curious to find out what was going on. And I reported all of this. You can see this in my website. You can see the documentation on this. And the reason I'm making this point is because there has been a concerted effort to discredit me. One of the things that people like to use to discredit me was a mistake that I made a couple of years ago when I was given information that I couldn't verify, and I renounced that and haven't been talking about it for the last 2 years. This has to do with whether there is more than one race of hominids on this planet. I have no way of proving this, and people are trying to discredit me for having mentioned this as a theory earlier on. I realize that this is simply a theory, and anyone who's trying to discredit me with this now is just exposing themselves as a person who's trying to discredit me. There are other things that people are using. They're using my family. This is really below the belt. I'm not responsible for my family, and I'm certainly not involved in anything that would discredit me with my family. If anyone has any questions, I'm remarkably transparent. You simply send me an email or raise a question on the archives of the DCTV programs. And I've now started, with my training from DCTV, I've started doing my own videos, and people have been making a lot of comments. You can go to those comments and you can see that there is no outstanding issue. And so the world's gold is available for the world's people for a global currency reset that we'll talk about a little bit later in the program. I'd like to talk about Greece. Last month, 2 major newspapers in Greece covered the story about the global debt facility and the global currency reset to replace paper currencies with local currencies and national currencies minted from the gold in the global debt facility. And this story is now spreading to Puerto Rico. This is because country debt is less than what the network of global corporate control owes us, which is 2 quadrillion in Treaty of Versailles bonds, denominated in gold, and they're held in the global debt facility. These bonds were issued in the 1930s and are accruing and compounding interest. Country debt is going to be offset against what the network of global corporate control owes us. In the last week, my tweet about Bernie Madoff went viral with a link to Edmund Dreile's movie, The Banksters Made Off with America. And let's see the clip, if you would mind rolling that. Co-chair of the Governor's Council. I've been keeping them all up to date. And then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Dempsey had a town hall meeting on the 2nd of December. So I asked him a question. I said, if we're talking about military strength for the United States, how can we be a strong country with a weak dollar? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are no longer using dollars in their international trade. That's 25% of world trade. And so I asked General Dempsey, why is it that we're not accepting the gold that's being offered to the United States? This is gold that John F. Kennedy had set aside for us. He printed out dollars issued by the Treasury Department. That means that we're not paying interest on our debt to the Federal Reserve. Those uncut dollars, they're being held secretly. So I asked General Dempsey, why aren't we releasing those uncut dollars? They've already been printed. Why aren't we letting the United States stand strong? He didn't bother to answer. I want to know what kind of a chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff wants the United States weak.
That's a great question. That's like a magical question, actually. You know, the magical question has always been, you know, who shot Kennedy? And it seems like they want us to focus on that. What are your feelings on it?
I know who killed him. Gambino, when he just got out of jail, he said that the mafia fired the kill shot out of a sewer. They were instructed to do that by the Jesuits. Those are the same people that assassinated Lincoln. And the reason they assassinated Lincoln and the reason they assassinated John F. Kennedy were the same reason, because both of those presidents didn't want the United States citizens' tax dollars to go to the Vatican via the City of London. They wanted the Treasury to issue dollars directly instead of the Federal Reserve notes. And in Lincoln's case, it was a different bank that we were going to have to pay interest to. That's just a scam.
And I think that the proof of that would simply be, you know, what happened after Kennedy was assassinated. Well, things must have been reversed. The printing of those dollars must have been halted or reversed, right?
Well, they never issued them. They left them uncut. They're waiting to be issued right now, and that's what I asked General Dempsey.
So what he put into place, into motion, they killed him to stop it. Because if he would have stayed alive, then he would have continued with issuing the money.
That's right. And not only is it those uncut dollars and the gold for the United States citizens, but the Federal Reserve collected gold just before World War II, and they issued bonds in return for the gold. That's $210 trillion worth of bonds, plus all of the compounded interest from the time those bonds were issued. It's now in the quadrillion of dollars. We can use those promissory notes to offset the U.S. debt. The U.S. gets out of debt this way.
So what you're saying is...
The 50 states of the United States are now being asked to pick up where John F. Kennedy left off. The Global Debt Facility has an account with the Union Bank of Switzerland, which holds the Treasury dollars that Ronald Reagan printed. Union Bank of Switzerland is refusing to release these uncut dollars so that these can be exchanged for the unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes. So I've been asking the Adjutant Generals to grant the Global Debt Facility access to print Treasury dollars in the Bureau of Printing and Engraving plant in Texas. In 2013, it was reported that President Obama had served 14 state governors in the United States with national security letters, warning that the governor's actions in attempting to form state defense forces needs to be halted immediately, or they will face arrest for the crime of treason. The employment of national security letters was authorized by the Patriot Act introduced by George W. Bush. In the section relating to these letters, it's forbidden for anyone receiving a national security letter warning to even acknowledge the existence of this communication. It seems to me that the treason is going in a different direction. The treason is in preventing the governors from organizing the national defense forces. These are the forces that we need to print our Treasury dollars and to end that scam called Federal Reserve Notes. The Global Debt Facility now votes the shares of the United States on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. The second secret constitution, which the bankers put into place in 1871, is no longer in effect. The United States was under martial law because the United States Congress was secretly extending the state of emergency from the Civil War. The legal profession has been complicit with the network of global corporate control and refused to acknowledge that the federal judges are not presiding over the courts guaranteed in Article 3 of the Constitution of 1789. Justice Anton Scalia died suddenly in Texas 3 days after the DCTV broadcast that criticized Justices Scalia and Clarence Thomas for this corruption. Now the martial law is ended and the United States is in interregnum. I have advised the Development Committee, that's 25 ministers who are working between the spring meetings and annual meetings, that none of the governors of the 50 states or their adjutant generals were willing to go on record that the United States Constitution of 1789 is in force and effect. The people of the United States do not accept the secret martial law that was in effect, and it had no legitimacy. As Overseer Mandate Trustee of the Global Debt Facility, and I'm in charge of the gold reserves that belong to the United States, along with the gold reserves that belong to the other countries that are members of the World Bank and IMF. I have declared the second secret constitution to be null and void. I advised Mr. Hervé Ladsou, head of the United Nations Department of Peacekeeping Operations, and Lieutenant General Maksud Ahmed, military advisor in the UN's Office of Military Affairs, to remove any and all troops seconded on U.S. soil for peacekeeping operations. Whoever invited them in was not authorized, and that authorization is now rescinded. I also informed the governors and adjutants general that as Overseer Mandate Trustee of the Global Debt Facility, I am reviewing the black screens of the Global Debt Facility on Euroclear, and I wrote a letter to the Development Committee inviting the other 6 authorized persons to come with me and accompany me. As Overseer Mandate Trustee of the Global Debt Facility containing the United States monetary gold reserves, I represent the voice and vote of the United States on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. The Federal Reserve is insolvent and in receivership in the Global Debt Facility, and liens are in effect on all of the Federal Reserve banks, including the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. There are also liens on the property of the agents of the network of global corporate control that are holding up the global currency reset. During this interregnum, there will be a peaceful transition from unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes to United States Treasury dollars that are backed by the international monetary gold reserves on deposit in the Global Debt Facility. The Union Bank of Switzerland is disregarding bailment laws, and Switzerland has not required UBS to release the uncut Treasury dollars that are on deposit in the Global Debt Facility. Switzerland is a rogue nation among nations. As Overseer Mandate Trustee of the Global Debt Facility, I am instructing the governors of these 50 United States and their adjutants general to grant Pete Thornton safe conduct to print Treasury dollars using the Bureau of Engraving and Printing plant in Texas. I also wrote to the 25 ministers of Finance and Development on the Development Committee, asking them to join me in viewing the Global Debt Facility's account on Euroclear. On June 3rd, I heard from David Tong, the chairperson of the International Trade Council in Singapore. Mr. Tong is a qualified charter accountant in Australia and Singapore. He was the founder of Medora and Tong, which later merged with Touche Ross and Company, Singapore. Singapore is where the gold was smelted and stamped with the symbols of the Global Debt Facility, which are TVM LSM 666. The first 3 initials and the second 3 initials are the names of Ferdinand Marcos's sons, and we've discussed about the meaning of 666. Those are three numbers, 600, 60, and 6, and those numbers mean humanity. The International Trade Council seeks to maximize areas of common ground and minimize differences. The Council also works closely with policymakers to sponsor the creation of additional networks, forums, and alliances which can provide focus for collaborative work and new growth opportunities. This also helps to provide a consolidated industry overview and helps participants to develop new skills. And let me read you the email that I received from David Tong on June 3rd. Subject, Global Debt Facility. Hi, Ms. Udis. I'm captivated listening to you on YouTube concerning the Global Debt Facility. You're completely selfless and are working in the interest of mankind. It appears to me that many people may not like what you're doing, and these people are very powerful. I will continue to watch your work. With our best wishes and kindly take care. Best regards, David Tong, Chairperson, International Trade Council, Singapore. That's on the positive side of the ledger. We're engaged in a struggle. We would be foolish to expect the network of global corporate control to simply throw in the towel. There is a concerted effort to confuse and frighten everybody. Remember, it's a fraction of the people who are aware of what's going on with the global currency reset. Here is something on the negative side of the ledger. It was an attack on the dollar on the 21st of April, 10 minutes before the markets opened. And we'll roll a clip showing what a commodity trader thought about an event which he fears confirms the warning that the Federal Reserve dollar does not have much more time to survive. The trader is concerned that the national media is now covering up the fact that the Federal Reserve dollar almost crashed and burned just before the opening bell on the 21st of April, 2016. So let's see what the trader had to say.
Pull up the bond real quick so you can see the bond first. All right, the bond market, absolutely. Look at this. Look how this thing came off. Look at this. They just went in. Someone started dumping these bonds. All right. Then you're gonna see here in the dollar how the dollar was absolutely toast. It was collapsing hard, and I don't know why my chart is not. All right, here though, you see this parabolic bar. The dollar was toast, broke all supports, just poof, and then they came in and they propped it up. And then look at poor gold and silver. These markets were just going parabolic, and then they just came in and they just look at that. Look at that. They just came in and dumped. All this is simultaneous. This coincides with the bond coming off, the dollar coming off, and at that very moment where they stopped it, you can see where they stopped it. And then look what happened here. Look at that. Silver down $1, got smashed $1. All right? So you move the gold market, you move the silver market, and by attacking the dollar. So you start selling the metals and putting an enormous amount of money in the bonds to try to stave off that and the dollar. So they attacked that. They put money at that to stop that. They couldn't stop the equities from falling the way they were, so they let that continue to pull back. But they had to save the dollar. So this was an emergency PPT action to save the dollar. I have not seen anything like this ever. This was absolutely amazing.
There is a debate with people who own guns in America. This debate is about sequencing. I am saying that we have a chance for a peaceful transition, and the only way to get this chance is to offer amnesty to the bankers and the rest of the cabal. There's no question that if the bankers do not provide a peaceful transition, what's going to happen? But the question is, before we want to give them a chance, and the only way to get this chance is to offer amnesty. The terms of the amnesty are that we will not jail the bankers. We can hate them, we can reveal what they did, we can retire them. As for the money part, we're limiting the amount of gold currency that each individual is entitled to exchange to $1 million worth. And the rules for exchanging Federal Reserve notes for gold and treasury dollars above $1 million have to be decided by people after they get themselves into grassroots groups and figure this out during the global currency reset. The rules about bank accounts and property are also going to have to be figured out. Where are we in the global currency reset? We're asking the United States military if they want to allow General Dunford to surrender the United States unilaterally by allowing Federal Reserve notes to crash, or if, and I said National Guard, but we really mean the state defense forces, whether the state defense forces are going to allow the global debt facility to print treasury dollars in the Bureau of Engraving and Printing plant in Texas. This is because Switzerland and the Union Bank of Switzerland refused to give the global debt facility the uncut treasury dollars that Ronald Reagan printed. The power transition model from the National War College is telling us that the chances we print treasury dollars in Texas are above 90%. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about what's happening with the National Liberty Alliance. Before, what was holding up the global currency reset was whether the elites were prepared to transition. And we know from the International Trade Council that this is a forum where we will have a dialogue with the elites. This is a very welcome development. But what is now holding things up is that we have to have a way to get through to people who have not been paying attention to reality, but were caught up in the matrix of the network of global corporate control and the false reality that the journalists, accountants, and legal profession perpetuated. Some group has to reach out and explain to these people what's happening. I had been hoping to rely on the National Liberty Alliance for this, but there's no way for me to do this without having permission, and it's not clear how much permission I'm going to get. I was mentioning to the people in the National Liberty Alliance that we were going to have this dialogue. What's very clear to me is that there is an effort to confuse people. It may not necessarily be with the leaders in the National Liberty Alliance, but what I've been saying all along is that people have got to get themselves into small groups, grassroots organizations, and to try to learn themselves what's actually going on. The real fault is not with National Liberty Alliance or any other group. The real fault is with people who are not taking responsibility for informing themselves. They're simply sitting back and accepting the lies that they're getting in the mainstream media. And that is very regrettable. As we go forward with the global currency reset, we are going to have to take responsibility for informing ourselves. When we have these networks, we'll be able to tackle the corruption. That's the way to hope. And I'm very optimistic that we will actually meet this challenge. That's what we expect. I want to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. The world's wealth in the global debt facility is going to come out to replace the corrupt fractional reserve fiat currencies. Enough of us know now how to distinguish what is real from what is fake. The trick is to help our friends and communities see things clearly too. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Udis.